She didn't wake up one morning and decide to stop loving him. No. Her heart didn't switch off like a light. Her tears didn't announce their arrival. Her strength didn't shout, "It's time." No. It happened slowly, softly, like a candle burning to its last breath, flickering, fighting, refusing to die, yet tired of being the only source of light in a room where love no longer lived. She had spent years trying to love a man who only loved the version of her that served him. She bent, folded, shrank herself into shapes that didn't belong to her, just to fit the space he offered. She apologized for things she didn't do, forgave things he didn't fix, carried weights he never acknowledged. She was loving him with full sentences, while he gave her half-written promises. And somewhere between holding on and breaking down, she realized she was losing herself. She used to laugh loud. Now she whispered. She used to walk with her shoulders lifted. Now she moved like someone permanently bracing for impact. She used to glow. God, she used to glow. But loving him dimmed her like a dying bulb, flickering only when he needed light, dark when he didn't. She cried the kind of tears that don't fall. They drown you from the inside. Tears that blur vision, swell the chest, make you forget your own name. Tears that make you question if love is supposed to feel like suffering, or if you're the reason it hurts so much. But she stayed. Not because she was weak. Never that. She stayed because women like her carry love like a sacred promise. Women like her try until their hearts bleed. They stay until the last door closes, the last hope cracks, the last apology repeats itself again and again like an old broken song. But the night it happened, oh, that night, she broke differently. It was the quietest heartbreak she ever had. No screaming. No throwing things. No begging. Just a stillness so deep. It felt like her soul stopped in the middle of a long inhale. He walked past her. Again. With that familiar coldness. That distance. That selfish silence. She asked a simple question. He answered with a tone that cut her open cleanly. Sharp. Effortless. Final. And she knew. Sometimes the ending comes not with noise, but with a whisper. A moment so small, yet it shatters everything. She walked into the bathroom, closed the door quietly, looked at herself in the mirror, really looked, and saw a woman she didn't recognize. Eyes tired, face swollen from yesterday's tears, heart bruised, spirit shrinking. And in that mirror, she whispered the truth she had been afraid to say. I can't do this anymore. Not like this. Not with him. Not at the cost of myself. And for the first time in years, the mirror didn't argue. It didn't tell her to try again. It didn't remind her of his potential. It didn't replay the good memories. It just held her reflection. Silent. Honest. Broken. But ready. Ready for change. Ready for peace. Ready to breathe again. She slid down to the cold bathroom floor and cried the kind of cry that rewrites a woman's destiny. A cry that empties you. A cry that frees you. A cry that washes off every lie you tried to believe. And when she stood up, she wasn't the same woman who walked in. She wasn't fully healed. She wasn't strong yet. She wasn't ready to leave. But she was ready to stop dying. And that was the beginning of her becoming, the beginning of her rebirth, the beginning of the day she chose herself. She walked out of that bathroom with her face still wet, but her vision finally clear, clearer than it had been in years. For the first time, she didn't see the man she loved. She saw the man he really was. And those two men were not the same. She stepped quietly into the bedroom, the same room where she had prayed for his change, cried into pillows at 2 a.m., waited for footsteps that never arrived, and begged God to make her enough. But that night, she didn't beg for anything. She just stood there, watching him. He was on his phone again, laughing at something, texting someone, smiling in a way he hadn't smiled at her in months. And it hit her like lightning, like truth splitting her chest open. She had been giving her whole heart to a man who only gave pieces. Pieces of time, pieces of effort, pieces of love, pieces of himself. Whenever it was convenient. She remembered the first time he broke her. Not with actions, but with neglect. When she waited for him for hours. Food getting cold. Her hope slowly dying. When he walked in without apology. Without explanation. As if her feelings were dust. She remembered the way he made promises. Big, beautiful, colorful promises. That turned gray the moment he got comfortable. She remembered the manipulation. The way he flipped everything around. Until she questioned her own reality. How he turned his mistakes into her guilt. How he betrayed her, but convinced her she was too emotional. She remembered the nights he rolled away from her. The mornings he left without looking at her. The way he made her feel invisible. While she was standing right in front of him. She remembered loving him so loudly that she forgot how to hear herself. And the most painful part, she remembered the woman she used to be. Before she met him. How bright she laughed. How easily she loved. How boldly she dreamed. He didn't just hurt her heart. He dimmed her soul. But on this night, for the first time, the memories didn't weaken her. They strengthened her. They weren't chains anymore. They were proof. Proof that she had tried. Proof that she had suffered. Proof that she deserved better. She walked to the wardrobe and pulled out a small bag. Not to pack. Not yet. But to remind herself. She had a choice. A choice she had been too afraid to see. A choice that had been waiting for her. Every time she cried. Every time she forgave too quickly. Every time she whispered, maybe tomorrow he'll love me better. But tomorrow had become years. Years had become a prison. And love had become a battlefield. She sat on the bed, took a slow, shaking breath, and said out loud, I miss the woman I was before him, and I want her back. The silence that followed wasn't painful this time. It was peaceful. It was freeing. It was the sound of a woman opening the door between who she was and who she was meant to become. She finally realized that staying was hurting her more than leaving ever could. She wasn't choosing loneliness. She was choosing peace. She wasn't choosing to give up. She was choosing to rise. She wasn't rejecting him. She was finally accepting herself. The truth had finally reached her. Sometimes the person you love the most is the person keeping you from breathing. And that night, she decided she was done suffocating. She lay back on the bed, closed her eyes, and for the first time in a long time, she slept without waiting for him. She slept knowing that tomorrow was coming, and she wouldn't face it as the woman who stayed. She would face it as the woman who finally chose herself. She kept walking, not because she wasn't afraid, but because fear had finally become too small a cage for a woman who had remembered her wings. And the world, for the first time in a long time, noticed her. You could see it in the way strangers glanced at her face, as if they could feel the quiet rebirth rising from her skin. You could sense it in the air around her. That gentle shift, that trembling newness, that spark you only see in someone who has survived something they thought would kill them. But let me tell you the truth. Healing didn't arrive like a miracle. It arrived like work. Messy work. Ugly work. Soul in the dirt work. At first, her nights were heavy, like someone had taken all the stars and replaced them with stones. The bed felt too large, the silence too loud, the memories too sharp, and she found herself whispering, "Why does leaving hurt more than staying?" But she already knew the answer. Because the heart grieves even what poisoned it. Because pain doesn't disappear. Just because the door finally closed. Because freedom is still freedom, even when it stings. So she cried. God, she cried. Tears that tasted like lost time. Tears that tasted like wasted years. Tears that carried the echo of every apology she never received. But every night, after the breaking, she still woke up. And there is something sacred about a woman who wakes up, even when her heart feels like shattered glass. One morning, she stood in front of the mirror and caught a glimpse of herself. Not the version he diminished, not the version she hid, but the woman beneath the bruised spirit and the quiet exhaustion. And she whispered, almost like a prayer, almost like a vow, "I'm coming back." She didn't know what back meant yet. Back to joy. Back to strength. Back to the girl she once was. Before love turned into survival. But she meant it. Every syllable. Every breath. That day, she cleaned her room. Not because it was dirty, but because the chaos reminded her of the life she was shedding. She opened the windows. Let sunlight spill into spaces that had gone dark for too long. And she felt the warmth touch her face. Like God was saying, "See, you're still here." And she was. Still here. Still breathing. Still capable of beginning again. She started doing small things. Drinking water before coffee. Praying without begging. Walking without rushing. Taking pictures of sunsets. As if she was collecting proof that endings could still be beautiful. She picked up her journal again. The one she abandoned. When she abandoned herself. And she wrote, "I want to live a life I don't have to recover from." That sentence followed her like a compass, pulling her toward new roads, new choices, new dreams she once buried beneath someone else's comfort. And slowly, she felt something shift. Her laughter returned, first as a whisper, then as a ripple, then as a full, unapologetic storm. Her voice, that voice he tried to silence, grew louder, wider, brighter. And her heart, oh, her heart, that poor tired thing, began stitching itself back together. thread by thread, grace by grace, day by day. Healing didn't arrive as perfection. It arrived as presence, as progress, as power. She started recognizing her worth. Not the version he taught her, the version she remembered, the version that knew. A woman who chooses herself is a woman no one can break again. But the real turning point, it didn't happen quietly. It didn't happen softly. It happened one afternoon, when she looked at her reflection and didn't see pain first, didn't see trauma first, didn't see loss first. She saw her, the woman she fought to save, the woman she walked away to find, the woman she once doubted she would ever meet again. And for the first time, in a long aching while, she smiled. Not the fragile smile she used to fake, not the polite smile she used to wear, but a real smile, one that rose from the ashes of everything she survived. And she whispered to the mirror, with a voice steady as sunrise, I deserve better, and I'm done apologizing for it. That was the moment, the true moment, the holy moment, the moment she finally stepped into the woman she was always meant to become. And she didn't look back. She didn't look back. But life always tests you. After you choose yourself. It came in small ways at first. Songs that reminded her of him. Streets they used to walk. Clothes she almost donated, but kept because they still held the scent of the woman she used to be. But the biggest test, the message. There's always a message. The one that arrives the moment a woman begins to heal. Hey, I miss you. Can we talk? Those 6 words. 6 little hooks. Trying to reel her back into the ocean she nearly drowned in. For a moment, her heart trembled, because trauma has muscle memory. And love, even the harmful kind, leaves fingerprints that take time to fade from the soul. But she didn't sink. Not this time. This time she breathed. Deep. Steady. And she remembered every night. She cried herself to sleep. Every morning she woke up empty. Every apology she gave, when she was the one hurting. Every piece of herself she handed over, just so someone else could feel whole. And she whispered, almost gently, almost with compassion, no. A simple word. A holy word. A boundary carved from the backbone. She finally grew. And the moment she said it, something powerful shifted inside her. Not anger. Not guilt. But clarity. She realized she wasn't healing from him anymore. She was healing for her. Because that's the truth about self-love. It doesn't start as a roar. It begins as a whisper. A tremble. A soft rebellion. Inside a woman who is tired of suffering. But eventually, it becomes a declaration. A revolution. A crown she wears. Without asking for permission. So she kept going. She started doing things she once abandoned. Buying flowers for herself. Bright ones that filled the room with the aroma of new beginnings. Dressing up even when she had nowhere to go. Because beauty was no longer a performance. It was nourishment. Eating slowly. Like someone who finally believed her body deserved kindness. Saying no more often. And realizing that peace was hiding behind that word. The whole time. She rediscovered joy in tiny things. The way rain sounds on the window, the smell of new books, the softness of her own sheets, the warmth of her tea, cupped between her palms. In the early dawn, she took herself out, to places she thought only couples should go. She ordered dessert, without waiting for someone to offer her the last bite. She walked through the city, with her head lifted, her steps steady, her chest open to possibility. And slowly, the world opened back to her. People began to notice. The glow returning to her face, the fire returning to her walk, the calm settling into her voice, the softness returning to her eyes. Not the softness of weakness, but the softness of a woman who survived the storm and came out with the rain, still dripping from her crown. Even her dreams changed. They stopped being about survival and started being about expansion, growth, joy, abundance, peace. She began to pray differently. Not God fix him, but God grow me. Not why is this happening to me, but what is this preparing me for? Not make them stay, but make me ready for the love that won't hurt. And those prayers, those were the prayers that changed everything. Her heart, which had been a battlefield, slowly became a garden. Tiny seeds were taking root. Self-respect, self-worth, self-compassion. Flowers began to bloom in places where wounds once lived. She started to realize that the version of her who chose him was not the version of her she was becoming. That girl loved from her pain. This woman loved from her power. That girl tolerated anything to avoid being alone. This woman would rather walk alone than lose herself again. That girl waited for validation. This woman looked in the mirror and whispered, "I am enough." And she meant it. One evening, as the sun dipped low and painted her room in gold, she sat on her bed, wrapped in the peaceful silence she once feared, and realized something beautiful. She didn't miss him. She missed the version of herself she had to kill to keep him comfortable. And she vowed, with a steady, fearless heart, that she would never bury herself again to keep someone else alive. She was done dying for love. She was ready to live for it, especially the kind she could give to herself. And with that vow, a new chapter opened. One where she wasn't just healing. She was rising. The sunrise came differently the next morning. Not just as light, but as a revelation. She opened her curtains, and for the first time in a long time, the world didn't feel heavy. Her chest didn't ache. Her breath didn't tremble. Her spirit didn't feel like a cracked glass, barely holding itself together. Something had shifted. Something sacred. Something final. She wasn't surviving anymore. She was living. And she knew it. She stood there in her oversized shirt, bare feet touching the cool floor, hair messy, eyes swollen from the tears of yesterday. But she looked alive, new, undeniably reborn. She whispered to herself, "I did it." And the words didn't feel small or fragile. They felt like a roar rising from deep inside her bones. Because people don't talk enough about the courage it takes to leave, to rewrite your story, to stop explaining your wounds and start healing them. People don't talk enough about the moment a woman wakes up with her heart stitched back together by her own hands, imperfectly, beautifully, stronger than before. People don't talk enough about the miracle of choosing yourself. She walked into the bathroom, looked at herself in the mirror, really looked, and for once, she didn't see the broken version of her he tried to convince her she was. She saw a fighter, a mother, a builder, a survivor, a woman who walked through fire with bare feet and came out glowing. She saw stretch marks and didn't hide them. She saw scars and didn't apologize for them. She saw softness and didn't call it weakness. She saw power and didn't shrink from it. This was her, all of her, and she embraced it with both arms open. Later that day, she did something small, but revolutionary. She bought herself lunch at a place she always said she'd wait to visit when she had someone. But the truth was, she already had someone. Herself. She sat by the window with her drink, her meal, her new piece, and she smiled. Not because everything was perfect, not because she had it all figured out, not because she wasn't still healing, but because she was finally free. The kind of freedom you can only taste when you've lived through the kind of heartbreak that almost killed you. The kind of freedom that feels like oxygen after years of holding your breath. The kind of freedom that reminds you you were never meant to settle for a love that dimmed your light. Because she didn't leave because she stopped loving him. She left because she finally started loving herself. That's the truth. That's the core. That's the beautiful, painful, powerful center of her rebirth. She finally understood something life-changing. Healing doesn't erase the past. It rewrites the future. You don't go back to who you were. You become someone new. Someone stronger. Someone softer. Someone wiser. Someone aligned. Someone whole. And she was becoming that woman. With every breath. Every boundary. Every step forward. That night, as she lay in bed, fresh sheets, warm heart, quiet room, she whispered one last thing. To the universe. To God. To herself. Thank you for letting me return to me. And the silence that followed wasn't empty anymore. It was peaceful. It was holy. It was home. She finally let go. Not to fall, but to rise. Not to lose, but to find. Not to end, but to begin. And the most beautiful part, she didn't just choose herself that day. She kept choosing herself every day after. Because once a woman remembers her worth, once she tastes her own peace, once she breathes without permission, she can never go back to the version of herself who forgot she deserved more. This wasn't the end of her story. It was the beginning of the most beautiful chapter yet. The chapter where she becomes unstoppable. The chapter where she becomes soft but unbreakable. The chapter where she walks in her truth, her purpose, her power, her womanhood, fully awakened. The chapter where she finally chooses herself, and never apologizes for it again.